Thank you for joining this episode of 805 Talk, a show about what's happening inside the 805, with a focus on the Simi Valley and Conejo Valley communities. We bring you everything local business owners, nonprofit organizations, government officials, community leaders, and real estate. Here's our host, Jeff Landau.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of 805 Talk, where I bring you inside the 805 and what makes up our communities. Before we speak with today's guest, Mr. Bob Miller, voice of the Kings for 44 years, we have our real estate report. Today, I want to discuss the importance of the first 2 to 3 weeks that a home comes on market, both from the seller's and buyer's standpoint. From the seller standpoint, this is a crucial period. This is the period where you are going to get the most volume of buyers coming through your home. And here's the reason why. I believe you can split every buyer into one of two categories. The first category is a buyer that's ready to go. They're pre-approved. They've been looking at homes. They may or may not have written offers, but they are ready to go. They know what they're looking for. They are actively getting listings from their agents. They're going to open houses. They're ready to go. So we can assume it's going to take 2, maybe 3 weeks for every buyer that's out there where your home could be suitable for them, that they will have seen your home either in person or at least online, and they've decided not to see your home. But after 2 to 3 weeks, you should exhaust all of that inventory of buyer. That's when you should get offers or multiple offers. After that, at least third week, you should expect the number of showings to slow down dramatically, because now the buyers that you're going to attract are new to the market. They're just getting pre-approved. They just got pre-approved. They're not exactly sure what they're looking for. They may not be exactly sure what city they want or what attributes that they want in a house. They have to get used to what the value of the market is, what an extra couple 500 square feet gets, what an extra bedroom costs. So they're all getting used to that. And that's the reason why those first 2 to 3 weeks are really crucial, and to have your home showing perfectly and to have it priced right. Now, from a buyer standpoint, it's really the same thing. If you see that a home has been on the market for 10 days and you go in there and that's the right home for you, it's a good idea to consider being more aggressive on price, because you're in that window where it's not going to be uncommon to have another offer come in. And if you try to get cute and you come in $10,000, $15,000 under where you would like to get it because you feel you need room and you don't want to write at asking or just under asking or even just over asking, if you want to be cute on it, you have to understand that you're giving time for the seller to counteroffer you. And then during that time, while the seller thinks about it, and they end up sending you a counteroffer, another offer could come in. And it may be a buyer that wrote a nicer letter than you, or a buyer that comes in with a little bit more cash, or a little bit better credit, a little bit higher price. So the more time you give for the process to take, the risk goes up that you either get into multiple offers, more offers come in, or just another offer comes in. If you're after that 3-week period, then it's up to your agent to at least see what the activity has been and if there are any other agents that are threatening to write. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight, both from the seller and buyer standpoint, of the importance of those first 2 to 3 weeks that a home comes on the market. And hopefully this helps you from a strategy standpoint as well. All right, so this wraps up our real estate report. Before we get on to our show, just want to remind you, in my effort to give back and support our community, if I help you or a friend buy or sell a home, mention this podcast, and at the close of escrow, I will donate 5% of the fees I earn to the charity of your choice. I know the charity of Bob's choice is King's Care, and this offer never expires. So let's get on to our conversation with today's guest, Mr. Bob Miller. I had a great time with it. I think Bob did too. He's an amazing guy. Hope you enjoy. I am thrilled to be here with the former voice of the Kings. Is it 44 years?
Yes.
44 years, voice of the Kings.
44.
Wow.
That was, I remember as a kid listening to the White Sox games in Chicago, and Bob Elson was the announcer. And one night they said, this is Bob Elson's 40th year with the White Sox. And I remember thinking, 40 years. Who would ever be with one team for 40 years? And then all of a sudden I thought, gee, I was with the Kings for 44 years. And it was my lifelong dream to be a broadcaster and do play-by-play. I would play Little League Baseball and describe the game while I was playing in it. And so I had the opportunity to do what I wanted to do and loved every minute of it. It was turned out to be 57 years in radio and TV, 44 with the LA Kings.
So what were your first 13?
They were, I worked in, well, I went to the University of Iowa and did play-by-play of Iowa football and basketball while I was in school, and then went to work in a little radio station, a small town in Iowa, because when I graduated, I wanted to go to work right away. I graduated on Saturday and went to work Monday morning. And that was mainly doing news at this radio station. And then got a job in Milwaukee at a TV station, Channel 6 in Milwaukee, doing kind of news reporting, not anchoring, but going out and covering news stories, and still wanted to get back into sports. And then moved from Milwaukee to Madison, Wisconsin. So it was a smaller market, but it was a sports directorship and doing one radio and 2 TV shows a day for that station. And still did some Wisconsin football. And then the Wisconsin hockey team got really good. And one Tuesday or Thursday, I don't know which, I was walking down the hall at the radio station, and the general manager said, "Oh, Bob, I'm glad I ran into you. This Friday and Saturday, we're doing Wisconsin hockey, and you're doing the play-by-play." And I had never done a broadcast of hockey play-by-play before in my life. I followed the Blackhawks when I lived in Chicago, but following a team and doing the play-by-play is a lot different. And so I fell in love with hockey broadcasting from the first drop of the puck. It was so challenging to do the game, keep up with the speed of the game, and then be accurate in your call of who scored and the placement on the ice of players and the puck. And I just also thought, when a hockey job comes up available, most people don't apply for it because they've never had any chance to do any hockey. Baseball, football, especially football and basketball, almost everybody who's done play-by-play has done one of those 2 sports or both of them. And I thought, when a hockey job becomes available, it cuts down the number of people who are sending in tapes, and it's a better chance of getting a job and moving up into a bigger market, and that's the way it worked out. So it worked out fine. When I did the first games for Wisconsin in hockey, we were on the road, and when I got back to Madison, saw the coach's wife, and I said, "Martha, did you listen to either of those games?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "How were they?" She said, "Oh, they were fine, but you didn't tell me who the referees were." And I said, "Well, is that important?" She said, "Yes. How do I know who to be mad at if I don't know who the referees are?" I've never forgotten that.
That's funny. So you said you had done football?
Yeah, I did Wisconsin football when I was a student.
Okay.
And Wisconsin football when I wasn't in school there, but working in Madison, and did the football at that time. So, and a little basketball at Wisconsin and at Iowa. So I had some experience in those 2 sports, but not in hockey. Iowa didn't have a hockey team. And so, as I say, when Wisconsin and Coach Bob Johnson coached Wisconsin when I was doing their games, and he later coached in the NHL and won a Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh, and he was so enthusiastic. So I went to talk to him. What do I need to know? Here's what you need to know. You need to know our Russian power play, and you need to know our Czech power play. I didn't even know what a power play was. And
Interesting.
He's telling me, here's what we do in this, and his enthusiasm was just infectious. You couldn't wait to see the games, and my last year doing the Wisconsin Badger games, we won the NCAA hockey championship in Boston, and
Wow.
So it was a good way to leave and join the Kings, and I thought for years and years that was the only championship I was ever going to win, the one at Wisconsin, and luckily 2012 we won the Stanley Cup, and we had a Stanley Cup party, and so did others. And I said to my wife one night on the way home from a party, are we going to go to every one of these Stanley Cup parties? She said, of course. We never know when it may happen again. 2 years later, it happened again.
Exactly. 2012 was the run when the Kings were in the 8th seed.
8th seed, still the only 8th seed that has ever gone on to win the Stanley Cup. And, it just came out of the blue. We didn't have a good season. Just barely got in as the 8th seed into the playoffs. And however this happened or whatever made it happen, just ripped through the playoffs. We had a 3-0 lead in every series in the Stanley Cup playoff, and wound up winning 16 and losing 4 and winning the Stanley Cup. And I mean, it was just, we only lost a game to New Jersey, and it was so close of us going undefeated and be 16-0. We were about that close, to running through the playoffs in that manner. And 2 years later, it was a lot different, and even the players said, this is the way we thought it would be, a lot tougher. And winning it against the New York Rangers and being down earlier in the playoffs, 3-0 against San Jose.
Right.
And then we won 4 straight to eliminate them. Won a Game 7 against Anaheim to eliminate them. Won a Game 7 in Chicago to eliminate them.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's another record as I remember, the team winning 3 Game 7s and winning the Stanley Cup. So my fear was, I always said, I know someday I'm going to retire and they'll probably win the Stanley Cup the next year.
I read that.
So luckily they won it while I was still working and then won it again. And you don't need any entertainment when you have one of those Stanley Cup parties. All you need is a Stanley Cup. And people come in, and it's a joy. It was a joy for me to watch the expression on their face, like, oh, the Stanley Cup, oh, that's all you need. And they'd come up to me, and we'd have the Stanley Cup there, and they'd say, can I touch this? I said, yeah, you can touch it. Can I kiss it? I said, yeah, you can kiss it. We're giving free tetanus shots in the back of the room.
Exactly.
And I've kissed the Blarney Stone in Ireland and the Stanley Cup, so I have no idea what I'm infected with right now.
Which one was more fun for you?
The Stanley Cup. I'm glad I got to experience kissing this Blarney Stone. They tip you backward, and they hang on to you, so you don't fall down.
I didn't know that.
But you got to be upside down to kiss it. And of course, then they take pictures, and you got to buy the pictures, or nobody will believe it. And but the Stanley Cup was just something that all of us were hopeful that we were going to see skated around the Forum and Staples Center, wherever we were when they won the Cup. It was at Staples Center, but we had played so many years at the Forum. But a lot of us thought we're never going to see it happen. And then to see it twice in 3 years was really a joy for everybody.
Incredible. So we're, just so people know, we're sitting in your office. Lots of memorabilia here, of course, and there's a picture of you. Oh, behind me, of you raising the cup in 2012. What was that like?
Well, Jim Fox, my partner, and I, we did the game, and at the end of the game, we had to do a post-game show on TV. So they were presenting the cup to Dustin Brown, skating around on the ice, and Jim and I had to go out, outside on a balcony outside the Lexus Club to do the show. So we didn't get down to the ice. And midway through that show, Patrick O'Neill came running up and said, "Bob, they're looking for you on the ice. They want you down on the ice." And I said, "Well, I'm doing this live TV show." He said, "I'll do that. You go down to the ice." So I went down to the ice, and my wife was out there on the ice, and she said, "Dustin Brown has been looking for you. He's got the Stanley Cup." And he said, "Where's Bob? Where's Bob? I got to give him the cup." And she said, "Well, he's doing a TV show." So when I got down to the ice, Dustin Brown was gone, as were most all the players. But I did get into the dressing room, and they were spraying champagne around, and I had it in my eyes and all over my suit and tie, and I couldn't see anything. And so they brought it over, and they're holding the cup, and they had champagne in the cup, and they're saying, "Okay, now here, it's right in front of you," because I couldn't open my eyes. And I felt the cup on my lips, and they poured it, and there was more champagne running down. But it was a tremendous moment.
Can I assume that in 2014 you hoisted the cup as well?
Yeah, 2014, I was down on the ice early because we didn't do a post-game show. But by the time I got off the air and downstairs, they had taken the cup into the dressing room and everything. But on that first story I told about 2012, they had a party in the restaurant in the Staples Center, and I was up there, and Dustin Brown came up, and that's that picture. He came up, "Finally," he said, "I saw you. Here's the cup." And they took the picture there of me taking a drink out of the cup. So great moment for the Kings fans. I was very happy for them because a lot of them were around longer than I was and thought they're never going to see it. So it was a great moment for all the fans to enjoy that. The parade downtown with about 300,000 people, and the parade in the South Bay, in the Hermosa Beach and Manhattan Beach and Redondo, where a lot of the players lived. So a lot of the fans that they would see attending the parade, standing on the side, were waving to them because they were customers of theirs and friends of theirs. And I think the players enjoyed that parade more than the big one downtown, because 300,000 people down there, you didn't know everybody.
Right.
So they were closer to the fans in the parade down in the South Bay.
Wow. So what's it like calling a game? Do you ever have you ever like got so into the game that there was a little bit of dead space, or your mind is just always going?
You know, the time that I would have purposely leave a little dead space, when I started, Foster Hewitt, the first ever play-by-play announcer of hockey in Canada or the U.S., was still working. And we were in Maple Leaf Gardens, and he was in the booth right next to me. And if the play was obviously going to be called for icing and there was going to be a stoppage anyway, I'd just kind of stop and lean over to listen to Foster describe an icing, which was not that exciting. But,
exactly.
But I just wanted to hear his voice and hear him describe that. And I had a chance to interview him. So the other time that there might have been a pause in some of those games, especially playoffs, especially going into overtime and sudden death overtime, I'd be so wrapped up in that I had to tell myself, just do the game. Just not become a fan. Do the broadcast. If the other team wins, you still have to do the same type of broadcast with the same enthusiasm and excitement as if the team you're following wins. And I'd have to tell myself, calm down, just calm down a little bit, you know. So it worked out. Another time I had to do that was Game 7 in the game against Toronto in the playoffs in Toronto. with the series tied 3 games apiece, so it was a deciding game against the Maple Leafs. And everybody in Toronto, of course, wanted the Maple Leafs to win because the winner was going to play Montreal in the Stanley Cup final. And that's such a great rivalry, Toronto and Montreal. And the Kings had the lead by a couple of goals. Toronto scored with a minute to go, and it was a 1-goal lead. And I mean, I was almost shaking because we were right there, win this, and we're in the Stanley Cup final. And they were, Toronto, buzzing around our net, behind the net, back in front, pulled the goaltender, and it was so exciting till about 4 seconds to go, and Marty McSorley cleared the puck to center ice, and that was it. So that was a time I think I had to just stop and take it all in, you know. So it's such a tremendously exciting game.
Yeah.
That I would get wrapped up in that. And the great thing is, to me, it's a job where when you go to work, you don't know what you're going to see. Who's going to win? Might I see something in that game tonight that I'd never described before? And when Wayne Gretzky joined the Kings, that would happen quite a bit. Your anticipation of going to see the greatest scorer in the history of the game was incentive enough to go and be really excited.
So what was your reaction when you found out that the Kings traded for Wayne Gretzky?
Well, it was one of disbelief, and I had heard some rumors, and I thought, I got to call Bruce McNall, who owned the team.
Right.
And he was not like my boss. He was a really good guy. He'd be on the plane with us, and he'd call me over. He'd say, Bob, come here. Tell me some Jack Kent Cooke stories. He wanted to hear stories about the former owner of the Kings. And so he was almost like your friend. And when he would hear those stories, and he'd love that. And it was fun for me to be associated with him. So I felt free enough to give him a call. I pretended I wanted to know how many games we were going to go on, put on TV. So I called him and I said, Bruce, how many games are we going to do on TV? And he said, well, we're gonna do quite a few more. And he still didn't answer the question I wanted to ask him. So I finally thought, well, I'm going to ask it. He may get upset, maybe not. So I said, tell me this, Bruce. Are you going to sign Wayne Gretzky? And there was this pause. And I thought, maybe I shouldn't have asked that question. He said, tell me this. We're going to change our uniform colors, and we're going to have a model come out with the uniform on at a press conference. And the model is going to be Wayne Gretzky. I said, if you pull that off, it's going to be unbelievable. He said, I think we're going to get it done. What struck me right then was this team is now going to go from a team that not a lot of people know about right to the top in popularity in the NHL. And I thought, and not only in Southern California, but around the U.S. and Canada, and sometimes around the world. A friend of mine was in Germany when the trade was made, and there was a headline in the German newspaper, Gretzky traded to L.A. And he said, I couldn't believe it. I saw the paper and I thought, what? Because he lived in L.A.
Fake news.
Yeah, right. Before fake news. So it was, and we were in Gothenburg, Germany one time, and walking down the street, and a guy came walking along with a Kings T-shirt on. And I said, where'd you get that T-shirt? He said, my girlfriend got it for me in Nuremberg. And I thought, this really is a worldwide event. And I just realized what that was going to mean to this King team and to all of us who worked for that organization. They had to put extra people on to answer the phones the night the trade was announced. People would call and say, I want I want 8 season tickets. And people would say, well, we don't know what the cost is going to be yet. Doesn't matter. Here's my credit card number. Give me 8 tickets. I don't care.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Is that how Wayne got announced, or how the trade got announced, by him wearing a brand new jersey?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit more of that. They called me. No, I'd heard that the trade was going to be made. And a Monday morning, I went into the forum, and Jerry West was the general manager of the Lakers. And he called me over, and he whispered, "The deal is done."
Wow.
I said, "How do you know that?" Well, he said, "I played golf yesterday with someone who knows." I found out later it was Bruce McNall. So then I was, I thought, still can't believe this is going to happen. And it sometimes almost didn't, because Bruce thought Wayne was going to change his mind. So he stayed with him and flew to Edmonton, where they announced it there.
Right.
Flew back with him all the time thinking, and he told Wayne, "If you want to change your mind, you go ahead and do it." And Wayne said no. So then the next day I got a call. They said, "We're going to have you MC a press conference when we make the announcement. Probably it'll be on Thursday." This was Monday. I get a call that afternoon. They said, "We need you tomorrow."
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
you can't wait on that.
I know. So we went to a hotel near LAX, and I had never seen that many cameras at a Kings press conference before. There were about 12 TV cameras going live with the announcement, and Wayne and his wife Janet were there. Bruce McNall was there, of course. Jerry Buss was there, who kind of started the ball rolling to get Wayne Gretzky, and then Bruce finished it up. And other people with the Kings, Rogie Vachon, who was the general manager, and all these people out there recording it. And when he came out and I introduced him, or maybe I introduced Bruce McNall, and he introduced Wayne. I don't think I got the honor of introducing Wayne, but Bruce did. And when Wayne came out, put on the jersey, the sound of the electronic still cameras, just hundreds of pictures being
Snap,
taken.
snap,
Yeah.
yeah.
And somebody said it sounded like machine gun fire. Just and somebody hollered, "What number did you get?" Like he's going to get anything except
Exactly.
99.
Exactly.
And so it was just tremendous. It was a tremendous feeling personally for me to realize the future this team has now, and to realize that how many people are going to want to see the greatest scorer in the history of the game, and be there every night to see it. And so it was unbelievable in that first Stanley Cup win, when we had such a big lead in the last game against New Jersey, 6-1, and the clock is counting down, and you knew we're going to win this.
Yeah.
And my partner, Jim Fox, is so superstitious that with about 4 minutes to go, the fans are chanting, "We've got the cup, we've got the cup." And Jim's going, "No, don't say that." And I thought, "Jim, if we blow a 5-goal lead with 3 minutes to go, we don't deserve the cup."
Exactly.
So it worked out great. And to see the fans high-fiving each other and toasting with champagne and just going crazy was so satisfying. I get choked up thinking about it.
I was
now.
just going to say, it seems like you're just you're taking yourself back to that moment.
I was reaching down, shaking hands with people, and then waiting for them to bring the cup out and skate around. And I think I feel that way because I thought I'm never going to see it. when I look over and we're on the air and Jimmy's got tissue up and he's crying. make me cry. He's crying. Fans are crying. It was a great moment.
Was that your 40th year? 39th maybe?
39th.
39th.
Yeah.
39 years and just wondering if you're ever going to see that, and then poof.
Yeah. And there it was.
An amazing run.
And then to win it again 2 years later, and it felt just as good.
That's awesome. So we, as a fan, we hear like the first one's hard, like which one's sweeter. You got to experience that more with, we probably had a little bit higher expectations now going from never having one to having one. And, there's the opportunity.
Yeah, that's right. And it was a final game against the New York Rangers in double overtime, and really exciting, and if we had lost that, we're going to fly back to New York, and if they tie the series there, we're coming back to LA for another Game 7. But one thing that made me nervous, I did not want to fly to New York the next day. I was exhausted. We were going back and forth, coast to coast, and so I was glad that Alec Martinez got that rebound and scored the game-winning goal. So it was satisfying for so many people and in so many different ways to see this team be called Stanley Cup champions.
Incredible. I remember, I think it was 2012 when the run went into your anniversary. Is that right? Yeah,
it would have been, because I think it was June. I've got it up on the wall over here. June 11th when we won it, or 12th, and my anniversary is on May 11th. So I don't know if I was on the road on that anniversary or home or what. I'd have to look it up and see.
Right.
So, but yeah, I look back, I'm very fortunate in that career to do what I wanted to do and have a great time doing it. It wasn't always great. There were some lean years, as you know, when the team was not doing very well. But Gretzky turned the whole hockey scene around in Southern California, and he doesn't like to admit it, but responsible for hockey in Dallas and in Atlanta at the time, and in Florida with 2 teams, and Georgia, North Carolina. He doesn't think he's responsible for that, but I think he is, because they were on television more, and a lot of the games involved Wayne Gretzky, of course, so people got used to watching it and wanted to go and see it in person.
And what a thrill we had as fans, assuming it was a thrill for you to announce watching the greatest player in the sport.
Yeah, it was. And a very down-to-earth guy. And we didn't interview him all the time. We told him, we know we could interview you after every game, but we're going to ask you maybe 4 times a year if you would come on. And he said, okay, that's fine. And I think that's what the media has to do with a lot of the real superstars. You could interview them every day, but you'd wear out your welcome, and it wouldn't be right to have them do that every day. So just say about 4 or 5 times a year, we'd like to ask you to come on, and he was okay with that.
Was it hard doing an interview after a game, like to ask? I don't want to necessarily say relevant questions, but just something it isn't. So what was it like to win the game, and how were your opponents? Like, to make it more interesting or more exciting for the fans to hear.
Yeah. I never had to really do post-game interviews.
Okay.
Jim Fox did a lot of them, but a lot of the questions the media would ask, some coaches and players think, oh, that's a stupid question. Why ask me that? They ask it so that the audience can hear it in that person's own words. I mean, we know when a reporter says, how did it feel at the end of the game when you won? Well, we know how it, but we want to hear him say that.
Yeah.
We want to quote him in the paper, want to put him on TV or radio and hear it in his own words. And that's why that's asked. I always think of Lou Boudreau, who played with the Cleveland Indians and was with the Chicago Cubs, and he knew the game as well as anybody. And yet he would ask, when you bunt, where do you like to put your hands, or where should your hands be? Well, he knows that, but the answer comes from the guy that's in the moment, and the fan hears it in that guy's own words. And that means a lot to those fans.
I hadn't thought about it that way. If I could just backtrack a sec. So you worked for Wisconsin hockey, and that was your first time announcing hockey. Did you ever go back to any other sport, or did you say from there you went to the Kings?
Well, I went to the Kings from working in Madison. I wasn't working for the university.
Okay.
But I was doing the games. The first hockey that I ever did was there. The first games I ever did play-by-play was I was a student at the University of Iowa, and I did some high school football in the Quad Cities, Rock Island, Moline, Illinois, and some basketball for them. And I got fired I didn't get fired, but I got relieved of my position in I thought, okay, I'm ready. I watched football and basketball. I'm ready to do the play-by-play. And drove out to Rock Island to do a high school game. And about the first 5 minutes, I knew I am not ready for this. The speed of the game was overwhelming. Players coming in and out, and I wasn't prepared with their names and any background on them, which was hard to do in high school broadcast because you don't get a lot of information. And so I did another game, and the owner of the station, his name was G. Laverne Flambeau, and he called me in and he said, "Bob, I think we're going to make a switch, but I want you to do basketball. I think you can do basketball, so the rest of the football season, somebody else will take over." And so I was disappointed, but I knew he was right. I was in over my head. So that kind of helped me realize you got to work at this. You don't just walk in at kickoff time or face-off time and sit down and do the game. Some people ask me, "You're on at 7:30. What time do you get to the arena? 7:15?" I said, "No." A little bit before that and days before that. So the change was made, and I always said I'm grateful to him for giving me another chance and not say, that's it, or you're fired, we're going to get somebody else. So I did basketball, and he was happy with that. The next year he said, "Do the football next year. You'll do fine on that, and do basketball." So I was doing that. Plus, I was still doing those sports at the University of Wisconsin or of Iowa. So I was still getting the experience I needed as more games I did, And but he gave me a second chance, and I've always appreciated that. So, and then with the hockey, I said there's a fine line, and I get tapes from a lot of guys who want a hockey job. Will you listen to my tape? And they talk so fast, I've got to rewind the tape to understand, what did he say? There's that fine line of keeping up with the speed of the game at a pace that the listener, especially on radio, who can't see it, can get that picture in his mind and do it at a pace he's comfortable with as far as listening to the game. And I always took pride in, and I hope, describing the game so that someone who couldn't see it could see it in his mind. And I believe this. I've read where people say, the play in whatever sport, whether it's hockey, basketball, football, baseball, if the announcer describes it right, you can see it in your mind. And that play in your mind is better than the one you would see on TV. Because in your mind, if he describes a catch, back to the wall, leaping, reaches up and makes the catch, you can picture that. On TV, that the announcer's not fabricating this, but it may not seem as exciting as what the announcer said.
Right.
So, as a kid, I would go in my bedroom, and it's too bad kids don't do that anymore. They don't take the time to listen to a game. They got the strongest thumbs in history, but they got to be doing something on their phone. But I would just dial around, living in Chicago, dial around, and on the dial, I could get games from, obviously, Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Detroit, Cleveland, and you could just go down the dial, and some of it would be static, and you could barely hear it. But I'd listen just to hear the game. And it was just a passion of mine at that point that I'd like to do that someday.
I don't know how many kids have the fantasy of doing play-by-play. I know that I did, and I watched a game, and I think I lasted about 30 seconds. I just couldn't keep up. You were alluding to a little bit earlier, what was your game day prep like?
Well, actually, it would start, if we had a game on a Saturday night and our next game was Tuesday at home, I'd start memorizing those numbers for the Tuesday game Sunday. And I would do it by getting a legal sheet of paper, and I'd do it numerically. Number 2 is to write his name. Number 3 is, then there's no number 4, so I'd skip a line. Number 5, just get in my head, there's no number 4, there's no number 7, so don't worry about that. And then just keep writing them down till I could do it, maybe have to look back to get 1 or 2 names. But I could do it in probably 15 minutes, and have that roster in my head.
You would have all the players memorized by numbers in 15 minutes?
Mm-hmm, most of the time.
Okay.
And it was easier when I started because the players stayed with one team all the time. And
right.
Now, lately, a guy is here. Now he's back in the minors. Now they bring another guy up, and it was more difficult. But I could do that. And then I would, let's say the night, a Sunday night, the team we're playing Tuesday would be on TV. I'd watch that and have my roster in front of me and check, this player, that player. They're all playing. Nobody's hurt. Nobody's injured. And then on a Monday, we get so much information at the NHL level. Game notes on every player in the game, notes on what they've done before, notes on their power play stats, penalty killing stats, goaltender stats. And you do a lot of that preparation knowing that most of it is probably not going to get on the air. But you never know when it is going to get on the air or when something's going to happen in a game and you've got a note on it and you know where to find it. And the person listening says, the other night you said this, and where did you get that from? Because it was right when it happened.
Genius.
So I would say from a Saturday night game, the preparation would be Sunday, Monday. For a Tuesday night game, our producer would call me the morning of the game at home, say, here's what we're going to do. And in the pregame show, you're going to do this. Jim's going to do this. You're going to interview this guy. Jim will interview this guy. And between periods, you're going to throw it down to Patrick O'Neill. He's going to do something here. Then he'll throw it. So we do that whole thing. And then the day of the game, I'd have all that written down so I know what the kind of script is going to be, although it's not really a script, but it's just an outline of what we're going to do each time. So the producer would call me in the morning and say, here's what we're going to do. Then when I'd leave for the game, 7:30 game, I'd leave my house about 2:30. And I'd get to the arena at 3:15 or so. just pick up the stats and game notes, check some things I want to check or double check, and then we would have a meeting of all of us that are going to be on the air, and the producer would go over everything again, what we're going to do. At the end of that meeting, we might have 40 minutes or so to tape interviews we want to tape for the game that night, and then take a break, get something to eat, and we'd be on the air. We'd be on the air live on the pregame show at 7, and I wouldn't be involved in that so much. We would rehearse our opening at 7:20, and sometimes those rehearsals were terrible. You'd think, if this is going live, we're in trouble. But it's something about, and I think every announcer probably has this, when you know it's live and you can't say, oh, forget, let's do that again.
Take 3.
Yeah. When you know it's one take,
Right.
it comes out, everybody's sharp, And so we would rehearse it, and then at 7:30, we'd usually do it live. There were some times we'd want to tape it just to make sure if there were some intricate things we did in the pregame show, make sure we get it right. We would tape it and then have all that on tape, and then go from there. So we would all be on the same page of what we're going to do. But once the game starts, it's all ad lib. You're describing what you're seeing, and we don't look back at that. He'd give us a script of the outline, and we wouldn't look at it really until the end of the first period. Just go back and refresh what's coming up here. And the producer is in our ear also, saying, okay, throw to commercial. And that's the hardest thing to get used to. Somebody talking when you're talking, because we're all used to stopping when someone talks. You stop to listen to them.
They would talk while they wouldn't wait until you were done?
No, you're talking and they're counting you down to the commercial. So you're saying, you might be saying, that's the end of the first period. The Kings got 2 goals in the first 5 minutes. And all that time I'm saying that, he's going 5, 4, 3.
Oh, God. That's going to be confusing.
And you just have to get used to it. You just have to stay with what you're saying and know you're hearing him, so you're out on time and the commercial starts.
Wow.
I think that's why most announcers that have done sports, play-by-play, love doing radio. They make more money in TV, but radio is what they really enjoy, because the announcer is saying whatever he wants to say. In TV, if I want to talk about Dustin Brown and Andrzej Kopitar's face is on the screen.
Interesting, right.
You got to change and talk about him.
Exactly.
But in radio, you talk about whoever you want to talk about, And so I've heard it described, radio is the announcer's medium, TV is the director's medium.
Interesting.
And I really believe that's true because of what I just said. On radio, you don't have to follow what's on the screen. You just talk about whatever you wanted to talk about at the time. You don't have to sync up with replays and that kind of stuff. You replay it, talk about it, but nobody sees it on what you're talking about. So,
were your games ever simulcast?
Yeah, first 17 years.
Oh, 17, wow, okay.
Yeah, first 17 years I was with the Kings, we did a simulcast. And Chick Hearn on basketball did simulcast too. And most people said, well, isn't it tough because you're talking about a play and they can't see it on the radio side. And Chick told me when I got the job, we don't ever try to pretend that we're not seeing a replay. Even though radio can't see it, we'll say, for those of you watching on TV, you can see here. And so the radio knows, okay, they're talking about something I can't see.
Talking about simulcast, did you get some mentoring or coaching from Chick Hearn?
Yeah, a little bit. He'd tell me, probably the best thing he ever told me, he said, Bob, I know when you're on the air, you want the Kings to win, and when I'm on the air, I want the Lakers to win. But we can be just a little bit to the side of right down the middle, because you've got to give credit to the other team. They're going to make great plays, and there are so many people, especially in Southern California, who moved here from somewhere else, and their favorite team is now playing your team, and they want a description because they're excited about their team, and they want to be excited, and you would be excited about them. So you can't be middle of the road, and because then you've got people saying they say it anyway. Well, he favors this. He's rooting for this team, and the other guys say no, he's rooting for that team, which means you're doing a pretty good job because
if that happens, right. But if you're the Kings announcer, you're not doing NBC nationwide and you're completely neutral. You're the Kings announcer, so. I mean, whether you were a fan before joining the organization, at some point you're watching the team play.
Yeah.
I think it would be natural for you to get more excited about them.
And your fans want that. I mean, your fans of the Kings want that. I got not complaints, but questions about why are you always so excited when the other team scores?
Exactly.
And I said, well, first of all, that's an important play. Especially in hockey, you never know, is that the winning goal or is there going to be, 2 or 3 other goals? So I always wanted to give, whether it's the other team or our team, give it the proper enthusiasm and inflection and excitement. And some of the fans, you've heard some baseball announcers, who want this certain team to win. The other team, here's a long drive to left, that's a home run. And it just turns me off to hear that. It's an exciting play.
Right.
Give it the attention it deserves. And it's so obvious then who you're cheering for because you're down in the dumps because the other team won.
Exactly. Although I would, it's got to be hard when, let's say the score's tied, there's less than a minute left, or if the Kings are up, the other team pulls their goalie, the other team ties it with 15 seconds left, and for you to say, "Oh, and the Blackhawks score," you're like, I mean, if it was me, I'm like, oh man,
that is hard because you want to give it the description it deserves, and I'd be talking to myself, especially in playoff overtime, thinking, I hope I'm not having to say Crosby goes the length of the ice and scores.
Exactly.
I'd still give it some enthusiasm, but that's a tough thing to do, and a tough thing when your team is not good. And I had enough years of that. When you're thinking somebody's out there listening that wants to hear the proper description of a goal or a play, and I'd always think of my wife, thinking, I know she's listening. Well, I hope she's listening. And I never wanted to go home and have her or somebody else that I know, friends of mine, say, "What was wrong with you last night? You weren't very excited about the game."
Interesting.
And I never wanted to hear that.
Right.
I wanted to hear, well, it was exciting, and I'm sorry the Kings got beat, but that last goal was really exciting, and so. I think if you approach it that way, you're fine.
I have so many questions that I want to ask you. Did the game get harder to announce as we got more of an influx of international players?
Yes, and everybody would ask me, "How do you say those names?" And
practice.
Yeah, right. And now when you look around, every sport has those players from Europe and everything with. There's somebody in Milwaukee, I can't even begin to pronounce his last name. So what I would do is go to the other team's announcer and say, how do you say this name? And the way he says it is the way I'll say it. There was one instance, we were playing the Coyotes, and they had a player named Branko Radivojevic. So I went to the Coyotes announcer, and I said, how are you saying this name? And he told me. And I said, is he scratched tonight? I hope he's not playing. No, he said he's playing. not only was he playing, about the first 5 minutes, he's the only guy that had the puck. And now I forgot his name. I'm calling him Stoyanovich and everything that sounded Russian or something. And so at the end of the first period, I went back to him and I said, tell me that name again. He said, Branko Radivojevic. But you can be like one of the other announcers who, when I told him how to say it, he said, well, he's not touching the puck on our broadcast tonight.
Exactly.
So I think every time you hear somebody say, don't forget, tickets available for Sunday night's game, he's got the puck. And by the time you get through saying that, he got rid of it.
Was there one player or a couple players you just had, for some reason, had like either a block against their name or just a little harder time pronouncing it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think now, other than Bronco, what it would be.
That goes without saying.
Yeah. But I would, I really was cognizant of be accurate in the name that you're calling people, because the worst thing is to continually call someone by the wrong name. It's not fair to them or the fans of that team and all that stuff. So I would go over that quite a bit before the games with the other announcers, and write it phonetically if I was having trouble with it.
Right.
Just write it phonetically so you know how to say it, and just go from there. But I think that's very important, because if that mistake is made continually, I think the announcer loses the confidence of the listener, who thinks he's doing the game. He doesn't know how to say that guy's name. And if you're a fan of that team,
right,
it really bugs you that this guy doesn't know how to say Ovechkin.
I heard Bob Miller was good.
So the preparation, to get back to one of your questions, almost is constant. I'd be on the road, sitting in my hotel room at night, and get out that piece of paper and write them down, put it away in my mind, try to go down the roster again, and miss 2 or 3, or I can't remember this guy's name, go back. And the other thing is, what I would have trouble with a lot of times is uniform numbers, because if you can't see the number, so I'd look for something else, like maybe the guy's got a face mask or a broken jaw, so he's wearing something which sets him apart from the other. Sometimes by their skating style, but the teams in the Eastern Conference that we'd only play maybe twice a year and separated by 3 months, it's tough to remember, their skating style. So you look for something else that sets them apart from the number. And so it's just a part of the broadcast that I think is a very important fundamental to get right and say the name correctly all the time.
And not only that, you don't know who's going to get the puck when. And, did it get passed? Did it get stolen? Did he get hooked? And you have to say that and that person's name while observing everything.
Yeah. And that's impossible to do in hockey. Football, you got a spotter pointing to who made the tackle, who made the reception a lot of times.
Didn't know that. Okay.
And I can pick that out when I'm listening. Like, here's a pass over the middle, complete, but I don't hear the guy's name. Complete to the 50-yard line, and it'll be second down, and all the time they're looking to who caught that.
Exactly.
And so you can catch that when you listen to the game differently than a fan just listens to it. And I say they're looking for who caught the ball or who scored the touchdown, and so there's ways that all of us announcers have to mask the fact that you don't know who scored the goal or whatever. I would say, a shot, score. It was tipped in front of the net, and you're hoping somebody by that time sees who did get a stick on it.
Yeah.
And in hockey, you need the replay a lot of times just to see the goal.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
So it was. There are times when you panic a little bit because you either lost sight of the puck and you don't know where it went, or you lost sight of the person who shot it and scored. But those happen in a game that fast. And I'd rather do a game that has a lot of action than one where I've got to fill time where, in a way, nothing's going on, you know.
It seems, not to put down any other sport or announcers, hockey's has to be the toughest game to do play-by-play because of the speed. Yeah,
I think it is, and because of substitutions with no whistle, jumping on and off the ice, and the speed of the game. And I think, and my partner Jim Fox could do that, because he played the game. I think he sees things I'll never be able to see, because he was in that situation. I'll see a goal scored. I'll get the guy's name who shot it, and Fox will say, I think it went off the tip of his skate blade. And I'm thinking, and it will show the replay, and sure enough, it went off. Now, he's got the advantage of being able to see that without worrying about the number or calling the guy's name right at the time, where I'm focused on the numbers and who's got the puck, and the color announcer can kind of look away and see, well, here's what led to that goal. So-and-so stumbled in the corner or fell over the referee or something, you know. But he can focus on that, and the play-by-play guy is focused more on who's making the play.
Was it easy to have chemistry with Jim to make sure that you guys were passing off when you needed to pass off to the other and not stepping on their words?
Yeah, I think that comes with doing the games. Early on, we would have some hand signals, like if I had something to say and I knew Jim would want to jump in there, just hold my hand up. Wait, I just have one thing to say. Otherwise, he's jumping in and I'm saying, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
After you.
Yeah.
No, after you.
But that came, I think Jim could tell by the inflection in my voice, he's finished with that thought, and he could jump in and I could do the same with him. So we didn't have to use the hand signals. It's just a chemistry you get between the two of you. Okay. And there are certain times in a game where you know the other person is going to speak, and at other times the play-by-play guy is going to speak. So that comes automatically a lot.
So over the years, how have you seen the game change and the players change? It seems, basketball is going to have, for the most part, a lot of taller players. Football, for the most part, is going to have more muscular players. Hockey, it seems like the players have gotten bigger, and the game has gotten faster, as opposed to like the 70s with the Broad Street Bullies.
Yeah. When I started in the 70s, you knew almost where everybody is on the ice. They didn't cross over, and the right wing stayed on the right wing, the left wing stayed on the left wing, the defenseman stayed back at the blue line. Bobby Orr changed all of that.
Right.
You look behind the net now, and here's defenseman back there, and you're on. Is that the right number I'm seeing? He's all the way behind the net, and so that has changed. And you're right in the size of the players and the speed. Big players now can skate, and skate fast. It never used to be that way. The little guys would zip around the ice, and the bigger guys were almost like pylons. You'd go around them. They were stationed in one spot. And that was the way the game was played then, because coaches would say, well, I really like so-and-so. He goes up and down the wing. And I always thought, is that the whole secret here? You go up and down the wing, and you never, like back and forth. And
like the hockey game.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the tabletop game, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And you don't go over to an open area that may be open on the left side. You're a right wing. You got to be over there. So I think the game being slower and players in the same position all the time was easier to broadcast. And now with the speed and the number of players, and I think the salary cap caused this, while it evened out the league, gave other teams a chance to be competitive and maybe win a Stanley Cup and keep their fans entertained, knowing they're still in the thick of the battle. But bringing a player up from the minors for one game, send him back the next morning, and he never played the night before. Now they bring another player up. You've got to bring up to date your facts on where is he from and what's he done and what's his background. And maybe he doesn't get in the game that night and he's gone the next morning. So there's so much change in the personnel. In the 70s, I could pick up the Boston Bruins Blackhawks roster and in 30 seconds tell you everybody who's in the game. They were the same players for the last 10 or 15 years. And they played every game. There seem to be more injuries now than ever before, even though they're better protected with better shoulder pads and elbow pads and everything else. And I brought that question up to Mike Milbury when he was GM in New York with the Islanders and coaching in Boston. And his answer, and I think it's pretty legitimate, he said, I think it's because we have more ways to find those injuries now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Years ago, if you had a sore ankle, they said, well, take some aspirin, tape it up, and you're in the game tonight. Now you go have an MRI or something, and they say, oh, you got a minor hairline crack in your ankle. You're going to be out 3 weeks. And I think that's legitimate, that there are so many advances in technology, medical technology, to find these injuries that keep players out of action.
Do you think the speed of the game and the size of the players contribute to that as well?
I think so, and the size of the rink. There are some people say it should be a bigger rink. I know Jim Fox, who played on the Olympic-size ice in Europe, doesn't like that. He said it's too big. There are times players are so far away from the net, you don't even have to go near them. Just let them stand out there. They're so far away, they're not going to be a factor in the play. In the smaller rink, it's more physical, more chance for injury, but more players are involved in the playing of the game and the physicality of the game. So, I guess there's a couple of schools of thought, because now almost every game, and you see these players are out. 5 players are out tonight. 6 haven't been played in the last several games. So I don't know how you prevent that. They've got good equipment, but sometimes the equipment is so good that it injures players. Hard shoulder pads, elbow pads, and just a body check where somebody gets elbowed, and it's not a padded elbow pad. It's now hard plastic or whatever.
Right.
And that hits you, and now there's an injury.
Interesting.
So, and I don't like the fact that fans go to the games now and don't know, well, who's playing tonight. Is my favorite player in tonight, or is he out?
Yeah.
And they don't like the fact that I just bought his jersey and he got sent to another team, and I had paid to have his name on the back.
Exactly. Did you notice more player movement with the salary cap, or?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
And like I say, while it evened out the competition a lot and brought parity to the league, everybody now has what they call a capologist, just someone who every day looks at that salary cap, because if you send a player down and bring a player up, that changes your salary cap.
Crazy.
The guy you sent down was making less than the guy you brought up. Now your salary cap changes, and so it did have a factor in the game.
Wow. So what's your thought on the parity from a salary cap as opposed to dynasties? You had Montreal had a dynasty, the Oilers, the Islanders, and I'm not necessarily saying that those were or weren't bought, but it seems like now it's, the Blackhawks won 3, the Kings won 2. It seems like the the experience of teams winning many more in a row has greatly gone down. Do you think that benefits the league or takes away something?
Well, I think that benefits the league, where every fan knows, hey, we could win. When you see a team like St. Louis be in last place last year on January 3rd and win the Stanley Cup, that defied the odds of that happening. But it can happen because of players coming up and down and the salary cap. And now teams, instead of being, like you said, Montreal, just saying, okay, Montreal used to get the top 2 players in Quebec every year. No other team had a chance.
I didn't know that. Okay.
The rule was top 2 players in the Quebec Major Junior League belonged to the Canadians.
That was a rule?
Yeah. And I always said, well, how did the other owners agree with that?
Exactly. How'd they swing that?
I don't know, but that's what happened. And now, of course, other teams have a chance to get those players, whether they're from Quebec or British Columbia or the U.S. or where.
Right.
And so I think that's been good for the league to have that even competition. And I know it's a cliche, but really, on any night, as you see now, the last place team can beat the top team in the league. And before the salary cap, you just go spend what you can spend. So the New York Rangers say, well,
right,
we're gonna spend this much. We can afford it. We're going to buy this player. And the other teams, well, we can't afford that.
Right.
So it's made a big difference. But at the same time, it's had a negative effect on who's in the game from game to game and season to season. We always used to say when we were kids in baseball, you could name every roster of every team. They never changed. Now, game to game in hockey and sometimes in football and baseball, they change now because of salary caps. Some are hard caps. The NBA, to me, is not a salary cap. If you want to go over it, you pay the penalty at the end of the year.
Exactly.
Well, that's not a salary cap.
Exactly.
You go buy who you want.
Exactly.
Or trade who you want. And you can do that because there's no hard limit on you can only spend $70 million, your team. And you say, well, I'm going to spend $100. I'll pay the fine.
Exactly. So what's your is the NHL expanding to Seattle next year, isn't?
Yeah, I don't know. They're redoing the arena up there, Key Arena. And I don't know if it's going to be ready for 2020. I don't think so. It's going to be 2021, I think. So there'll be another team, 32 teams.
What's your thought on expansion and I hope no one's going to get mad at me by saying dilution of talent?
Well,
if I offended anybody, I'm sorry.
There's that school of thought that thinks you're not getting the top players. In the old 6-team league,
right,
there were only 120 players making the NHL. And that's why you saw them. I don't care if you break your nose and cheekbone and everything, you're back in the game because somebody is going to take your place.
Exactly.
And but because of that, I think we missed out seeing some really good players who were great in the minor league, just couldn't get that chance in the NHL. And so that wasn't good either. And so I think with those players, like I say, we missed out on some fabulous players who never had a chance to play. But, the game just keeps changing that way, and rules change. And so every year you've got different players and different rules. I can't say it's bad because if it makes the game better, I think that's better for everybody. But there's always debate on that from people. Are you going to have enough players to play at that level? But at the same time, more young players and good players are coming out of college and playing in the minor leagues and then moving up to the NHL, or being drafted and born and played in California and they're playing in the National Hockey League. Years ago, people said that would never happen.
Never happen. Right.
Yeah. The only ice they know is in a glass. So, but they're good players, and now the league is recognizing when you go and scout, don't shortchange the college player. The theory used to be a college player only plays 34 games. It's not enough games, and there was a real prejudice against guys who played in college compared to junior hockey in Canada, where they play 70 games or something like that.
Oh wow, okay.
So they always, you gotta get that guy from Canada. He's a better skater. He played more games, and now with the change of the U.S. Olympic hockey team, which had some good, and probably that changed with the gold medal win in 1980 at Lake Placid.
Yeah,
they realized, hey, these guys can play. Now they go to major tournaments around the world, and they'll win some of those tournaments. Teams from California go to the Quebec tournament, which is a big tournament in Quebec, and win it. And people there it's teams from California. We had a coach one time went to a tournament in Quebec and got up to speak before the first game of the hockey tournament, and he said, "Isn't this a swimming tournament? I thought we were swimmers." He thought they were swimmers. He knew they were hockey players, and they won the tournament. So
wow,
that has been a major change in the competition at those levels.
Huh. You had mentioned when you spoke to Mr. McNall that he wanted to hear stories about Jack Kent Cooke. Can you share one or two stories about Mr. Cooke?
Yeah. I got. Can we go another 2 or 3 hours? He was a hands-on owner, and I have no problem with that. It was his team, his money, but he would listen and watch the games and call you in his office the next day and call me dear boy. Never called me by my name. Dear boy. He said one time, I said something on the air one night I thought was kind of funny. He called me in, he said, "Dear boy, do you know who my next door neighbor is?" He lived in Bel Air, and I said, "No, Mr. Cooke, I have no idea who your next door neighbor is." He said, "It's Jerry Lewis. He has 14 writers. You don't have any. Don't try to be funny." And I would think of that if something had happened. I'd say, no, I'm not going to say it because he'll be all over me. Or one time he wanted us to run 14 30-second commercials per period. And he said to me, "What do you think of that?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Cooke, we're running 4 now." And they wouldn't stop the game for commercials then like they do now.
Oh, wow.
So you had to work to get those 4 in depending on the pace of the game. And I told him that. And I said, there are some nights I'm struggling to get 4 of those in. I don't know how I'd get 14. He said, "Well, then you will mention the sponsor in a different way." And Datsun, now Nissan Datsun, was our main sponsor. For instance, you will say, "There's Marcel Dion scooting down the ice like a Datsun." He said, "What?"
Just to make it more challenging.
"What do you think of that?" And I thought, I was in meetings when Chick Hearn would be in there and I'd be in there, and Mr. Cooke would say something like that, and Chick would say, "That's a wonderful idea." And I'd think, what are you agreeing to, Chick? That's the worst thing I ever heard. He'd come up with another crazy saying, and Chick would say, "That's another wonderful idea." And I'm going, oh, what? And we'd walk out of Cooke's office and go down the hall, and Chick would lean over to me and say, "That silly bastard, we aren't doing any of that stuff." And I thought, maybe you're not, Chick. This is your 40th year. This is my first year. I'm probably doing it. But I couldn't say that. So I stood up. I said, "Mr. Cooke, I can't even imagine saying that once a year, let alone 82 times. And he went ballistic. "Get out of my sight. Get out of my sight. I'm sick of your attitude. And I think I kind of had a little smirk on my face, like, are you serious about this scooting down the ice like a Dotson? And he says, wipe that smirk off your face. Do you know how many people want your job? And they're this close, holding his forefinger and thumb close together, this close to having it. Now get out. And I stood up and he said, sit down. I'm going, holy cow. So Dan Avey was my partner then, and Dan's sitting over there with his head down, and
he's not saying anything.
Yeah. So Cooke says, get out, and I want you two back in here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to tell me how you're going to do that. Now get out. So we got out, and we walked down the hall. Secretaries about 200 feet down the hall said, what did you guys do? They could hear him screaming at us.
Wow.
So Dan and I go to lunch in the Forum Club, and we're kidding around. And I said, hey, you know what? I could say Marcel Dion has scored 10 seconds after the opening faceoff. And Dan, you come in and say, dot soon. And we're laughing, and we could give a Goring number B210, the model of Dotson, as a uniform number. And so finally Dan says, well, are we fired? I said, well, it's only 10-1. We got till 1:30 or 2 o'clock to get in there. So we go back in, and Cooke is sitting there just staring at us. And he could just stare right through you. And he looks at me and he says, well, I said, well, Mr. Cooke, we could say the score on the Dotson scoreboard is the Kings 3, Montreal 1. This is the Dotson Kings radio broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at me and he says, my, aren't you a brilliant fellow? And I thought, well, he was so condescending all the time, you know. Trying to think what else. Just knowing he was, and I almost quit about a month into my job. I was driving to the Forum, and I told my wife, I almost quit tonight because I thought, if I hear from him tomorrow about you're not doing this or you're not doing that, I'm going to say, well, then why don't you get somebody who can? Because I said, I can't do a game this fast, worrying if every word out of my mouth is going to satisfy Jack Kent Cooke. It can't be done. I'm thinking more about what's he going to think if I say this or this, and you can't do the game that way. And so I said, you know, I was going to go in and say, look, if this isn't right, get somebody else then. And that night I went, and everything was fine. I never heard from him. Did the game I wanted to do it my way, and lasted 44 years.
Worked out pretty well. Worked out well. So I'm sitting here next to a picture of you with Vince Scully and Chick Hearn. How graced, and I don't know if this will be a question, how graced we were as LA sports fans to have such amazing announcers. Where is that picture from, and did you meet them both often or a couple times, or?
Well, I met Chick a lot and talked to him on the phone a lot because he got me my job. And so if anything came up, he said, give me a call. And I'd call him, Chick, what about this? What should I do here? Vin, I didn't see as much until later in his career. And then I'd see him if I went out to the ballpark and stop in and say hello. And we took him a Kings jersey for his retirement with a 67 on it for his 67 years doing the Dodgers. So I presented it to him in the booth, and I said, now, Vin, number 67 means you might not make the team. You may be a prospect. He said, well, I'm working on it. I'm trying to make it. And that picture with Vin and Chick and myself was taken at Fox Sports Studios. We did a half-hour show, the three of us. Bill McDonald moderated it, and Vin was sitting to my far left, Chick was sitting in between, and then I was sitting on the right. And there was kind of a lull in the conversation. And I said to Bill McDonald, Bill, look at the rings on these guys' fingers. And we hadn't won anything yet. And Vince said, this is World Series 1988. Held his ring up. Chick said, this is NBA Championship 1987. Held his ring up. The camera panned over to me. I said, this is my wedding ring, 1963.
Exactly.
Vince said, that was the greatest line I've ever heard. So it was my pleasure. I mean, I've always been thrilled to be mentioned with those two guys who were so good.
Was Chick like a mentor to you, or were there certain lessons that he imparted?
Yeah, that one I mentioned about give the other team credit. You know, they're trying to win too, and they deserve the best that you have, not that you're going overboard and sound so happy that they beat your team, but give it the proper announcement that it deserves. And there were just other things that might have gone on during a season or happened at the forum, and I'd call him for some advice. What should I do in this situation? And a lot of it had to do with somebody else in management there telling me, I think you should use this guy as your color announcer, and then do this, and like as part of the broadcast. And, you know, Chick would always say, tell them to get out of here. You're doing the broadcast, not them. So, you know, and I would enjoy talking to him. We never did much socially because our seasons conflicted. They'd be on the road during the basketball season and we'd be home, and then we'd be on the road and they'd be home. So, you know, I'd see him at the forum sometimes and talk to him, and at the ballpark. But we didn't, I don't think we ever really went out to dinner. And I'd see him at sports banquets and things like that. You know.
Yeah, you had almost exactly overlapping seasons, and you weren't playing on at home on the same nights, right?
Yeah. And then I think in the off season, it was just a time that, you know, I didn't go down to the forum that much, and I don't think Chick did either all the time, although he did have a management position for a while under Jack Kent Cooke. But it was just a time to, and I never wanted to do a sport all year round or different sports. I wanted that time in the summer to just recharge and relax and get ready for the next season and be enthused about the next season. I think if you do sports all the time and one season runs into another and pretty soon you've done 12 straight months, I'd get burned out on that. So I needed that time, just relax and get so excited about the start of the next season. And that's why I think both of us, we never would call, say, hey, let's get together, let's have lunch, let's go here or there. It was just a good relationship, but kind of a distant one as far as socially.
Now, you've written 2 books?
2 books.
What was the impetus behind writing a book, let alone a second one, and what are some fond thoughts or memories from them?
Well, I would tell people these stories, some that I just told you, and they would always say, you got to write a book. You got to put these in a book. And I thought, I didn't want to write a book while I was still doing the game with players. And it wasn't a tell-all book. It was just anecdotes about what went on. But I didn't want the players of that era to say, be careful what you say to him, because he'll write it down in a book. So finally, when we had the lockout in 04-05, I thought, and there was some rumors, they may not come back. They may not have hockey again. And I thought, well, this is the time I'm going to write the book, because if they don't have it, I want all these things written down. And I didn't do it to say this is going to be a great bestseller. I wanted it just to have it in writing of what went on during my career. And so when they went out on that work stoppage, I thought now's the time to do it. And Wayne Gretzky is with the Kings. So it would have that much more interest because Wayne's name would be on it and not mine. You know, we're going to buy it because of mine. But so I sat down and I said, I'm not a writer. I don't think I can do this. And I thought, oh, I'm going to try it. I know the stories. I tell them ad lib all the time. And I'm going to sit down. So I sat down one Saturday, took the story down to my wife, and she read it, and she said, this is exactly the way you tell this story. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go write some more. So over the next few weeks, we had a publisher who was going to look at it and say, I want to publish this book. So I didn't have to do that groundwork. So I wound up writing 110 stories. And some of them are short, some are longer, but it all had to do with things that happened in the game or with the team or anecdotes from the road. And we got it printed, and it was really good. We had some book signings. I went to one in Santa Monica, and the woman running it said, do you know we have 200 people in line? I said, is that good? She said, we have world-known authors, and there's 15 people come out to get the book signed.
Wow.
So she was thrilled.
Wow.
And one guy at the end of the line thought, they're going to run out of books. So he drove over to Manhattan Beach to another bookstore and bought 10 of them and brought them back and got in line to have me sign them. So that was really gratifying to me. And then we won the Stanley Cup, and I thought, well, I've got to do something now. We won the greatest prize in hockey, and I've got to do a follow-up book. And so I wondered, I could do it on the games, but I had to do something more than that. And our former TV producer, Bob Borgen, he said at one time that the team wanted us to, during the work stoppage, do something on the internet just to keep people reading about the team and the Kings. And could each of the announcers just contribute some stuff once in a while to the internet? And his suggestion, and I thought it was good, was he said, you've done games in hundreds of arenas. What about arenas that no longer have NHL hockey or no longer even exist? They've been demolished. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll jot down. I figured there was 10 or 12. I wound up with 29 arenas.
Wow.
That were demolished or no longer had NHL hockey. So I wrote about things that happened in those arenas that I thought were interesting, humorous, stuff like that. I wrote about one when the Kansas City Scouts were in the league, and they were a terrible team. We played at Kemper Arena, and our broadcast was in like a suite with just a little piece of plexiglass in front of us and the crowd right below them. And we were losing 3-0 to the Kansas City Scouts. And I was so upset. And then we scored 3 goals or something to tie it, and the fans got all upset, threw soft drinks and programs and everything out on the ice. And I said, well, that shows you the mentality of these fans in Kansas City, throwing debris on the ice and interfering with the game. And about 6 rows down in the stands, I hear a guy say, did you hear what he said about us? And we had nothing in front of us except this little 6-inch piece of plexiglass. And he stands up, and he's like 6'5", didn't come out to come up the stairs to the booth. He came right over the seats, one step after another, and he leaned down right in front of me on the counter where I was doing the game, and he's right a foot away from my face, and he's staring at me. So now he's blocking my view, and I've got go from side to side to look around him to do the game. And I didn't know whether he was going to throw a glass of water or a soft drink at me or something. And we used handheld mics. So I picked up, and my partner, Dan Avey, he picks up the mic. And if the guy does anything, he's ready to smack him with it. And Dan then says to an usherette, go get security. So she leaves our booth, which was just off the concourse. And if she walked in our room today, it would be the first time I've seen her since 1974 or something. She never came back. And he just stood there, and he was just livid. Then we scored again. So I really...
Oh, God.
So I said, the Kings have scored again. They're really pouring it on. And he's just in the fury. His face is... and his fists are clenched.
Oh, my God.
And I think he's going to do something, and he starts ripping up his tickets, and he throws them at me and says, I'll see you later. Now, you could walk out in the concourse and come in our booth. And there's no security or anything. So the whole third period, I'm doing the game, looking at the ice, and then turning around, looking over my shoulder.
Exactly.
He never showed up again. So... and as I said, neither did the usherette. So things like that, would happen in a game sometimes. And so I wrote about those. And in the second book, the first book is Tales of the L.A. Kings. Second book is Tales from the Kings locker room, which kind of a misnomer. It wasn't always in the locker room, or hardly ever. And so I put the writings about the arenas that no longer exist, and then about they reprinted some of the other stories from the first book, and then I wrote about the Stanley Cup playoffs. So two of them, and I tried to buy some to have in my possession, and they said, we don't have any more. They're sold out. We don't even have any in the warehouse. So, which disappointed me. I wanted some of those just to autograph and give them to some people. So, but it was fun for me to do that and look back and see some of those stories. And the players did more hijinks then than they do now. I don't know whether it's they make so much money now they don't want to jeopardize their career or what. But, they just used to do things. One was a story of Phil Sykes and Bernie Nichols. And Bernie and Phil had a room in Victoria, British Columbia, where we had training camp. And two rookies were next door. And it was a really nice night in Victoria. And Bernie said, let's sneak over to that room next door and scare those guys. So they go out on the balcony, and you could step to the next balcony with not much danger. So they step over there. They open the sliding glass door was open. And Bernie gets down on his hands and knees, crawls into the room, and Phil Sykes is right behind him. And they crawl over to the bed, and Bernie jumps up and goes, "Oh!" What they didn't know was those two rookies had been sent back to their junior teams, and two elderly women now occupied that room. Bernie said the woman sat up in bed and screamed so loud she scared him more than he scared her. So he sneaks out, and now Phil doesn't know what happened. He comes over, and the other woman jumps up, and they both go back to their room, and Bernie said, we're on the floor in hysterics. We're laughing.
That's awesome.
But the women called the police, called the front desk, who called the police. The police came over, found out what happened, and I think Bernie and Phil said, yeah, it was us. And so they had to pay for the women's room. They had to, what else? They had to do something else too. And the police let it go. I don't think they made a report on it.
Wow.
But it was hilarious. And I wasn't there to see it, but just to hear about it and hear about this woman sitting up and screaming. And
that's great.
So they do a lot of those. I wrote about that in the book and several other things.
Did you have a favorite arena out of those 29?
I think my favorite arenas for the most part, were in Canada. And I don't know if there's a different building code in Canada, but the seats are really steep. And in the U.S., like at the Forum and Madison Square Garden, they're so gradual, a slope back, you're way back at a lower angle and at the back of the arena. The same architect did the Forum as did Madison Square Garden. And I always hated working in Madison Square Garden. You could hardly see the other player on the other side of the ice, and it was just a bad angle. And Canada, in Montreal Forum, the old Montreal Forum, I wanted to see how steep the seats were in that lower bowl and how soon I would be above the glass. 8 rows from the side of the glass, 8 rows up, you were sitting above the glass. That's how steep that was. And so I always judged my favorite arena on how good a vantage point we had to broadcast the game. The Forum was not great. The Forum had people coming down to their seats that would block the camera's view, my view.
Wow.
The other problem was the cotton candy guy would come by right below where we were doing the game, and he'd have a full pallet of cotton candy, and I'd have to go back and forth to look around him to see the game. And in the Miracle on Manchester, the great comeback by the Kings to beat the Oilers, I don't think I ever saw the final tying goal go in the net. It was 5-5 with 5 seconds to go, and fans coming down to the seats were blocking the camera view and my view, and I just knew everybody was roaring. But it was not a good vantage point. Boston Garden was pretty good, although almost too low. You could talk to the players on the bench.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that was too close. I always felt like I was trying to catch up to the game. It was a small rink anyway, smaller in length and width than the normal.
Right.
And there were a lot of those. Buffalo didn't have a regulation rink. Chicago didn't have a regulation rink because they were put in these buildings that were built before the hockey came in. So the dimensions could have been for boxing, could have been for something else, and they didn't change them. And so you'd have a good view, but sometimes it was different doing the game. I felt rushed in the Boston Garden all the time.
So did calling games in the Boston Garden be a little bit different for you because you could hear you could probably hear the players more than when you were in other stadiums? Did that?
Yeah, I didn't hear the players because I had earphones on and just the noise in the building.
Okay.
But if play stopped or something, I could lean down and just say, "Hey, Rogie," and he's looking up, and I didn't do it very often. But so the other arenas, the old Odd in Buffalo was an old arena. We used to work out of what they called the bucket, hanging off the front of the balcony, and you'd crawl down a ladder into the bucket. And
wow!
But it was a great view. You're looking right down, and the old Olympia in Detroit, it was the same way. Glenn Fry of the Eagles music group, I saw him one time coming out of the Forum, and he was born in Detroit, and a big hockey fan. And I said, you're a big hockey fan, huh? He said, yeah, I was born in Detroit. I said, well, we're going to be in Detroit next week. Would you? He said, I'm going to the game. I said, well, would you come up between periods and do an interview with me? Sure. I said, I'll leave your name with the press box usher. So the usher, I said, there's a guy coming up between periods for me to talk to, and it's okay, let him in. So the first period ends, there's nobody shows up. And I thought, well, maybe he forgot. And we had a booth with a door on it. There's a knock on the door of the booth. I open it, and the usher's there. He says, there's some guy out here says he's with the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think Glenn Fry was not very big.
That's funny.
And he said, Philadelphia Eagles? No way. And I said, not the Philadelphia Eagles, the musical group, the Eagles. Those kind of things just kept you so interested in that profession because things happen not only in the game, but when we were together at dinner or something, and with other teams' announcers, and it was just a joy for me to do that for that many years.
Nice. Maybe a good way for us to wrap up. We're sitting here in your office. There's memorabilia on the walls. Are there any, one or two or three favorite ones that just evoke a certain memory or a certain feeling? I mean, I'm sure all of them do, but any of them stand out?
Well, the Stanley Cup one does in hockey, and one that did not have to do with hockey. I was fortunate to get a star on the Hollywood Boulevard Walk of Fame, and the ceremony was going to be on Monday morning, and my sister and brother, sister-in-law and her husband came out here to visit us and go to the ceremony. So we went down there. She said, I want to see where that is, that Hollywood Walk of Fame. So we went down on Friday night, and we're walking along, and where mine was going to be on Monday, they had barricaded with wood barricades so nobody stepped on something that wasn't dry yet. And so we're looking at that, and my sister-in-law said, I want to get a picture of this. So she comes around, and I'm standing there, and they're taking a picture, and a woman that I'd never seen before or since, and apparently her daughter, stood right next to me. And the woman said to her daughter, I wonder whose star this is. And I didn't say anything. And she said, yeah, it's got wood all around it. And I wonder whose star that is. So I finally said, that's my star. She said, yeah, right. It was the greatest. I told that story at the ceremony. It was perfect.
That's great.
And so they walked on down the street. Then they came back toward where we were. And as they walked by, I said, Monday morning on TV, if you want to see my star. Oh, yeah. She still didn't believe it. But the yeah, right was. That's
funny.
Yeah, right.
That's funny.
So things like that happened that, you couldn't script it. And it gives, I thought, I'm telling that story.
Exactly.
And so everybody laughed about that at the ceremony. So that was fun, that whole ceremony. Johnny Grant doing the mayor of Hollywood. And that was a good moment that I remember. And you have memorabilia from that. So, and that over there, Nick Nixon at Christmas one time, he was my partner on TV and now doing the radio, gave us, all the announcers, framed pictures of the final score sheet from the first Stanley Cup. And
nice.
It was great. There are a lot of times I use that. If somebody says, did so-and-so play on that first Stanley Cup? I said, I'll tell you in a moment.
Exactly. Just walk right over. So. Nice. And when you have a picture with you and Wayne Gretzky, when was that taken? That was
when he scored his 802nd goal, the all-time leading goal scorer in the history of the league. And a very astounding stat to me, he scored 894 goals in his career. If he never scored one goal, he'd still be the all-time leading scorer in the history of the NHL just on assists. Take away the goals, because you get a point for a goal, point for an assist.
For points, right, okay.
So take away 894 goals, and he still leads everybody in leading scorer in the league. And the one above that is Bobby Orr's.
Bobby Orr flying through the air.
Great game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then the one on top of that is me on the right side interviewing Vince Lombardi, the Green Bay Packers coach, in the middle, and Pete Rozelle, the commissioner of the NFL, on the left. And Pete Rozelle looks like he's about 15 years old.
All of you look 15 years old.
Thank you. Best thing you've ever said about me. And so I met Pete Rozelle at an athletic banquet one night, and I told him, I have that picture of Vince Lombardi and you in 1960 in Milwaukee. He said, wow, that was my first year as commissioner. And so that was, I covered the Packers in those glory years with Horning and Starr and Lombardi, and so just great Packer teams, that. And I worked for a TV station in Madison, Wisconsin, and if you didn't in those days, if your network didn't carry the TV of the games, you didn't get the highlights. They didn't trade highlights like everybody does now.
Right.
And so we were going to go shoot film of the championship game between Green Bay and Dallas, with the winner of the game going to Super Bowl #2 in Miami. And so we drove up to Green Bay. I woke up that morning of the game. The clock radio went off, and the first thing I heard was, it's 7:30 in Madison, and it's 26 below zero.
Ice Bowl? Wow.
The Ice Bowl. My wife said, you're not going to any football. I said, we got to go or we don't have highlights or anything.
Of course.
So we drive to Green Bay. We're thinking we'll be in the press box. We get to the press box, no room. They said, you guys are going to be on the roof of the press box.
Oh, Lord.
So luckily we brought enough clothes and everything. We get to the roof. They had canvas around to keep the wind off of us, and big cauldrons of hot coffee and hot soup. But it was 16 below zero at kickoff time. And we stood up there the whole game. I was never so cold in my life. End of the game, we ran into the Packers locker room because they won. And from my knees down, I had no feeling in my legs. And I'm interviewing Bart Starr, interviewing Ray Nitschke.
Wow.
And Ray Nitschke has his shirt off and bare-chested, and it looked like somebody took a razor blade and just slashed him all over his chest and arms. And it was from falling on the frozen turf, where the turf would be, frozen to a point, and that would just cut him. And it was unbelievable. What a great game.
Wow. What was it like interviewing Vince Lombardi?
It's another story I have. I worked at a TV station in Milwaukee, and we decided we're going to do a half-hour show on film, a week with the Packers. What do they do every week leading up to Sunday's game? We're not going to show the game, just the preparation. So I typed a 3-page outline of questions to ask Vince Lombardi. So we drive up there and go into his office, and I said, Coach, what we'd like you to do, when I ask you a question, like what do you do on Monday, start with, on Monday we do this. What do you do Tuesday? On Tuesday, quarterbacks meet and all that. He said, okay, let me see your questions. So I gave him the outline, and he's got a pen with him. He's crossing out this question, cross out this question. He's editing the outline as we're talking. He says, okay, let's go. So the cameraman comes in. We went 45 minutes, and he was perfect. Answered every question the way we wanted the start. On Monday, we do this. So I thanked him. We went to lunch. The cameraman comes in and says, there was a light leak in the camera. The film is blank.
No. Oh.
I thought, I said, well, I'll go in and tell him. But you know what a stickler he is for perfection. And
exactly.
You're going to hear him kick me out of his office miles away. So I went back there, and he was there. And I went in. I'm just thinking,
how do you say that to him? I mean, you have to.
He's just going to rip me.
Exactly.
So I said, Coach, we had a little problem. You were great, but there was a light leak in the camera, and there's nothing on the film. And I'm waiting for him to kick me out of his office. He said, is your cameraman still here? I said, yep. Get him in here. Let's do it again. Did the whole thing again. And I've told people I didn't know it at the time, but I think it was my first lesson in preparation, because if he had thought I didn't prepare for this with that typewritten outline, I don't think he would have done it again. But he knew I spent time trying to get this the way we want it, and he respected that. So let's do it again. Now, the kicker to the story is he was just as good the second time. His son was working for the Packers at that time. And our last shot on the film was going to be, it's Sunday morning. The lockers are prepared with helmets, shoulder pads, cleats. So I said to his son, Vince's son, is somebody here who could put helmets and shoulder pads in the lockers? That's going to be our final shot. And he said to me, why don't you have Dad do it? And
I'm not asking him.
I'm thinking, what? After what I just told him, I'm going to go ask him now to put shoulder pads into lockers. I remembered for the life of me, the equipment manager's nickname was Dad. Everybody called him Dad. Dad Brasher.
That's funny.
And I thought, God, I'm glad I knew that. Instead of going up to Vince, we wouldn't be talking here today. So that was really a funny story that I've told for years about meeting and interviewing Vince Lombardi, because he was strict and he was a stickler. We used to go cover their training camp in Green Bay, and we'd stand on the sidelines, and he'd purposely run the Green Bay sweep and say, anybody is on the sideline, knock them over. If you're running end run, just run. If you're knocked out of bounds, just run into him and knock them over. No, he was.
If you were too close, or
yeah, because he felt we were too close, or we didn't get out of the way in time.
Oh, did that ever happen to you?
No.
Wow.
I was far enough away. That's why I picked hockey. I got far enough away from the sidelines.
Just got to duck for the puck. Exactly.
So, but you know, it's great to do this and just look back at some of the fun times that I've had, and so many people. And I've told our kids this: they hate getting up in the morning and going to work because they hate their job. I said, I look forward to it, because going to every game, you wonder again, what might I see tonight? And so it was a great career that I had.
We were definitely blessed as Kings fans to have you to listen to and take us through those games. And really,
Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome, and I really appreciate your willingness to meet with me and to be on the show. Really appreciate it, Bob.
You're welcome, and it was my
Thank
pleasure.
you.
And I'm glad we went so long. Gave me a lot of memories.
Wow, it's I've never had a show this long, and it definitely doesn't feel like it was. Really appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for listening to another episode of 805 Talk with me, Jeff Landau. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can probably sense that first 10 or 15 minutes, I was just so amazed that I was sitting down with Bob and just hearing a voice that I've heard for so many years. It took me a little bit of time just to ease into having a conversation. And Bob, just the most genuine and nicest guy, and it was a really fun show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you do have any questions about real estate, please reach out. You can reach me by phone at 805-341-0398, or you can find me on my website as well at jefflandauhomes.com. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to my daddy's podcast.